Belch out Fellfire upon your opponents, transform your body into a demonic visage, leap around the arena with your torn wings, and silence your foes before they get a chance to stop you. These are all the things you get when you play a Demon Hunter. The theme of the Demon Hunter is a hero that's willing to sacrifice their own personal well-being in order to save the world. They consume and embrace fell energy and transform themselves into these hunters of demons, as the name implies. Led by Illidan, the Illidari transformed and became fell beings themselves. This turned them into essentially evil creatures, and they use the power of this embrace to save the world from the Burning Legion. This class is locked into the two races that are elves, so you can only be a night elf or a blood elf if you're going to play this class. This is due to some of the lore-based reasons around the Illidari themselves and is baked into the game's mechanics. So what they're good at is speed and agility. They're super fast. They jump around the battlefield and are able to use their sigils to quickly take control over every combat. Sometimes difficult to keep up to, this also means that they are very good at sticking to targets that are trying to get away from them, as well as just locking everything down in a very effective way. They bring a very powerful debuff, where they're able to increase the magical damage taken by targets by 5%. This is extremely valuable, and most raid groups are going to be guaranteed to be looking for a Demon Hunter. With how few players out there are actually playing this, especially in the raiding scene, it gives you a very reliable raid spot. The sigils you can place down get you a lot of control over the battlefield. Putting these out in locations that you know are going to need an activation in a couple of seconds can quickly gather up targets that are hard for other tanks to get. The Sigil of Silence, able to shut down an entire pack of casting units, is so valuable in your ability to gather up and handle groups that other tanks just can't. While Demon Hunters are not the bulkiest of the tanks, they do have a great, reliable way to heal themselves regularly. With the soul fragments that are constantly popping out, they can remain quite healthy without very much attention from their healers. With a couple of emergency cooldown buttons, you can stay alive for a very prolonged amount of time. What makes them fun is really the speed and agility. As you're leaping around the battlefield, you're going to be having a blast. You just feel like you cannot be stopped, and it just is very rewarding. Also, the transformation of yourself into your demonic form always feels good, with Metamorphosis being a massive reduction in damage taken and just a very bulky ability, and then Eye-Beams just feeling so good as you dish out that massive damage and heal yourself for loads. The Demon Hunter is just generally a very rewarding class to play. This class comes with two unique resources. First is Fury, which you'll build up a purple bar underneath your health bar as you use several of your abilities like Fracture. Generating Fury will then allow you to consume that with your more powerful abilities like Soul Cleave or Fell Devastation. The second resource is Soul Fragments. Fracture and other abilities will generate soul fragments that will pop out from your targets and scatter across the arena. These fragments are little purple floating balls that, upon using other abilities like Soul Cleave, will suck into you for an effect. Soul Cleave will use them to heal, where Spirit Bomb will use them to explode for additional damage. Rotationally, you're going to be using Fracture for the most part to be generating your Fury, as well as using Fell Blade for a larger burst. That Fury will then be spent on using Soul Cleave to heal yourself and to do a little bit of AoE damage, or on Fell Devastation for a massive AoE and self-heal. Your defensive ability is Demon Spikes. This has a decent duration and gives you a massive armor and parry boost. You have 2 stacks of this, but the duration does not match the cooldown, and there will be moments throughout the fight that you're not going to have Demon Spikes active. It is very important when learning to play the Demon Hunter at balancing when you have your Demon Spikes so that when you're taking those big hits, you have that armor boost. New or not very experienced Demon Hunters are going to be managing their Demon Spikes incorrectly, and they're going to take massive hits at very unfortunate moments. You definitely need to practice when to use these, as well as to pay attention to when the boss damage spikes are, so you can maintain this buff effectively. Managing your movement abilities as well as your sigils is going to be the biggest part of becoming better at this class. Each of your different sigils has an important use, and you want to make sure that you're using them effectively as well as holding them for the correct moments. You're not always using these things on cooldown, as there will always be moments where they're more effective than others, and their slightly longer cooldown means that you need to be smart about when you're using them, but you also don't want to just waste them. You don't want to go through a full duration of their cooldown where you did not cast it, because that's just a waste. 30-second and 1-minute cooldowns dominate your kit, so you're going to be constantly using those abilities throughout a fight. Many tank classes are relying on things like 3-minute cooldowns, 2-minute cooldowns, where you have a much larger array of abilities that you can use regularly throughout the fight. This does mean that your average mitigation is low, and you need to make sure that you understand your weakness of incoming damage and using these 1-minute cooldowns to negate that. Onto the talent tree. Throughout the Demon Hunter tree are several thematic designs, so there is your increase in movement with things like Vengeful Retreat, Fellblade, and the Hunt, where there's also parts of sigils where you get your extended sigils, your Sigil of Misery, as well as your precise or concentrated sigils. You can focus on improving your sigil play. That's really good for more experienced players that are really good at that snap decisions of when to use sigils. You can just go with abilities that just generally increase your effectiveness passively, reducing the damage you take, increasing your mastery, or improving skills that you're guaranteed to be using. And then there are a lot of nice little abilities hidden throughout the tree that make a huge difference to this class. So you're able to get things like Darkness or Chaos Nova, the Hunt, that are all really powerful active abilities that are really good for those players that can track multiple active abilities. I think no matter which tree you go down in the Demon Hunter, you're going to be making good decisions. There's of course going to be the best decision for certain scenarios, certain bosses, certain PvP situations that you can take, but I don't think there's a lot of trap cases, and I don't think that there's a lot of disappointing lines throughout this talent tree. When dealing with dungeons, I really like to get Fell Devastation improved with this Collective Anguish, where you have a second Demon Hunter show up and help you out, as well as just the increase in mastery and reduction in your damage taken. This side of the tree is very effective for new dungeoners. I find the Hunt is a little bit difficult to use and doesn't quite have the feel that I would be looking for in a dungeon sense, and I think it's much better as a PvP talent. It's still good and usable, but I often find it doesn't give the impact in dungeons that I'm looking for. Improving the sigils feels really good, and going that sigil route is an excellent way to play the game. I prefer to get a little bit more passive things because I tend to be doing things like raid leading or paying extra attention to external details, which makes it more difficult for me to focus on my current character's abilities, and so paring down the amount of active abilities I have is usually beneficial for me. Onto the Vengeance side, I find it extremely important to get pretty much every talent that improves your armor spikes. So that's going to be things like Deflecting Spikes, Calcified Spikes, and Extended Spikes. Each of these is going to be pretty pivotal to effectively using your Demon Spikes and make it so there is a much smaller window of time that you are not effectively using them. I also really like to increase Fell Devastation. So Fell Devastation is the first talent you have to take, but there are improvements to it like Ruinous Bulwark, as well as Stoke the Flames, that really improve Fell Devastation's capabilities. I really like those abilities, and I really like to increase Fell Devastation, so that's kind of the route I went. For dungeons, I've been using the Elysian Decree to get a nice sigil that is very effective at generating soul fragments, as well as does a nice chunk of damage, which is good for picking up packs. If I were to go into a raid situation, I'm going to prefer Fiery Brand improvements, like Down in Flames, because that's going to be more effective on a single target, which is what you're dealing with more often when you're in raids. If you're focusing down in the PvP side, things like Vulnerability and Soul Crush are excellent in your PvP experience. So I definitely feel like there is a little bit more focus on a PvE versus PvP side over in the Vengeance tree, where in the actual Demon Hunter tree, it's much more open and you can make more interesting choices. So that's my quick drill into the Demon Hunter class for Dragonflight. I think this class is a lot of fun to play, and the thematic style of it really comes through as you're playing the character. The flames transformation and throwing of your glaives is just very rewarding, and it's just a really good class to play. Mastery of this class feels better than it does on any other tank, so players that like to play at the top level really feel good when they're playing a Demon Hunter. I hope this guide helped you figure out if Demon Hunter is the tank class for you in this expansion. If it's not, maybe you should check out our guide on Death Knights. They're my favorite tank class, and they might be yours. Thanks for watching this guide, and we'll catch you guys next time.